I never expected to be sidelined in my own department, overshadowed by the very people I helped elevate. Yet here I am, Sterling Stewart, Senior Account Manager at Crestline Enterprises, managing contracts that generate nearly $1.8 million annually, 89% of my department's revenue. 12 years ago, I entered this company as a junior associate, and through relentless precision and innovation, I climbed the ladder. My expertise isn't just in client retention or revenue forecasting, it's in the proprietary system I created, the Client Engagement Tracker, which I built single-handedly to monitor contract milestones and renewals with surgical accuracy. The company's IT department doesn't even know about it, giving me exclusive control over critical client data and renewal strategies. This invisible infrastructure underpins nearly 100 Fortune 500 clients who trust me personally. Despite this, or maybe because of it, a quiet tension brews beneath the polished professionalism, as my direct supervisor, Ronan Wright, increasingly sidelines me in strategic meetings. I'm fully aware of my value, but I'm equally aware the political winds are shifting. I remain calm, measured, understanding that in this game, reputation and subtle power plays matter more than raw numbers. Crestline Enterprises operates within a strict hierarchical sales division that rewards political maneuvering as much as actual sales achievements. For 3 years, I've reported directly to Ronan Wright, a man whose smooth exterior masks a Machiavellian operator adept at stealing credit and undermining strong subordinates. When Ronan first promoted me, our working relationship seemed collaborative, based on merit. But 6 months ago, during a quarterly board meeting, Ronan publicly took credit for a sales strategy that was entirely mine. The sting wasn't just professional embarrassment, it was a calculated power move. Following that, I noticed subtle shifts: exclusion from key client renewal discussions, replaced by less qualified staff. I told myself it was management reshuffling, stress of Q4 deadlines, nothing permanent. But the company culture fosters aggressive internal competition. Political games aren't just tolerated, they're rewarded. I kept my composure, documenting everything discreetly, understanding that a direct confrontation would be reckless. The environment is tense, charged, yet far from openly hostile. I'm the silent keystone in the department, constantly vigilant. My secret weapon is the Client Engagement Tracker, a system I engineered over 5 years to handle contract renewals, client satisfaction, and pricing adjustments. It's a tool so precise and indispensable that without it, Crestline's revenue cycle would falter, especially regarding the 47 top-tier clients I manage personally. These clients don't just trust the company, they trust me. None of their contracts are direct corporate deals. They're negotiated and maintained under my stewardship with individualized terms. CET isn't documented anywhere in our IT archives. I hold sole administrative access. Beyond that, I maintain a secure digital archive of all communications and signed agreements on an encrypted personal server. It's a safeguard against data manipulation or loss, a kill switch if necessary. This control gives me leverage few realize. Within Crestline, Marcus Hayes, the senior legal counsel, respects my professionalism and discretion, while Alison Porter, a client relations officer, aligns with my transparent approach. Outside, Peter Collins from rival Bridgepoint Solutions is a name I track, an untapped potential ally. This network is my insurance policy, a measured power I haven't yet deployed. The first blatant slight was at the last internal sales summit. I had painstakingly compiled analytics for a contract renewal strategy that promised an additional $320,000 in revenue from renegotiated terms. I was prepared to present, armed with data and projections. Instead, Ronan took the stage and delivered the entire presentation as his own. The VP of Sales and other senior managers witnessed this appropriation. I kept my composure during the summit, but afterward I documented everything: email chains, presentation drafts, timestamps, all evidence lining up to protect my claim. When I requested a private meeting, Ronan brushed me off, calling it standard executive protocol and telling me to be grateful for the exposure. On the surface, I accepted his explanation. Internally, I flagged the incident as a red line. Financially, Ronan's theft jeopardized my upcoming bonus, roughly $35,000 tied to individual revenue attribution. I responded professionally, drafting a formal email to HR requesting clarification on credit attribution policies, carefully avoiding emotional language. This was a calculated move. Adhere to protocol, remain above reproach, but plant a seed of doubt. I'm watching, documenting, and biding my time. The game has changed, but I'm far from defeated. The moment I pushed back against the subtle marginalization, Ronan's tactics escalated with clinical precision. First, I was removed from the department's strategic planning committee, the very forum where I'd shaped critical client acquisition policies for years. My seat was handed to a junior colleague with barely half my tenure, someone Ronan had been grooming for loyalty rather than competence. It wasn't an accident, it was deliberate exclusion. He seeded whispers that I was too focused on individual success and not a team player, carefully framing doubts about my leadership credibility among peers. These insinuations weren't loud but effective, eroding the quiet trust I had built with cross-functional teams. Even my closest allies faced pressure. Alison Porter's client assignments were shifted away from those I managed, a calculated move to isolate me from my network of influence. I noticed how her emails became more formal, distant, and how our once fluid collaboration became segmented and procedural. Meanwhile, Ronan took every minor operational hiccup, a delayed contract renewal here, a misfiled client invoice there, and attributed them to me in management meetings. His tone was always casual, as if stating facts, but the subtext was damning. My reputation, painstakingly built over more than a decade, was quietly undermined with bureaucratic precision. Requests for budget approvals, essential for client engagement initiatives I'd championed, suddenly slowed to a crawl or were outright denied without clear justification. I filed each rejection, noting dates, the chain of approvers, and any correspondence. The pattern was unmistakable. I wasn't the target of oversight. I was the target of a campaign to stifle my influence, yet I maintained my composure. No confrontations, no impulsive reactions. I stayed within official channels, knowing that every deviation would give Ronan ammunition to label me unprofessional or insubordinate. Instead, I compiled detailed logs, a dossier of sorts, documenting every instance with witness names and timestamps, sure that precision and patience were my strongest weapons in this shadow war. Despite the escalating pressure, I continued to do my job with the same surgical accuracy as always. I met client deadlines, responded to inquiries promptly, and maintained the delicate balance of internal politics with cold calculation. But under the surface, I was recalibrating, identifying patterns and predicting moves. Ronan's confidence seemed unshakable, but his underestimation of my resilience would soon become apparent. The more he tightened his grip, the more data I collected, proof not just of his tactics, but of the institutional vulnerabilities I could exploit later. The silent war had entered a new, darker phase, and I was no longer just defending territory. I was preparing to reclaim it. Recognizing the escalating personal stakes, I decided to escalate formally. I gathered my evidence, email threads showing stolen credit, detailed logs of excluded meetings, and memos documenting client interference. With these in hand, I approached Crestline's HR and compliance departments, requesting an official mediation. The scheduled session was clinical and cold, held in a glass-walled conference room that felt more like a holding cell than a space for resolution. I presented my case systematically, laying out the data with methodical precision. Witness statements corroborated my claims, performance metrics left little room for dispute. I held my ground, answering questions without hesitation, confident my documentation was airtight. Yet the response was disappointing. HR representatives, while polite, repeatedly deferred to Ronan's long-standing leadership and strategic discretion, phrases drenched in corporate doublespeak that masked clear bias. It became apparent that Ronan's family ties to a board member complicated matters, creating an invisible shield that institutional policy couldn't penetrate. The message was implicit. Ronan was untouchable. I sensed the structural rot, an organization prioritizing stability and hierarchy over fairness and merit. The system was compromised, but I refused to be deterred. I reiterated my willingness to cooperate fully, emphasizing my commitment to Crestline's success, while mentally preparing for the long haul. This was not defeat. It was reconnaissance. Despite the cold shoulders, I maintained professionalism, knowing that any lapse could be used against me. I continued to document every interaction, every dismissive email, and every subtle slight. The quiet knowledge that this evidence might one day serve in legal or higher corporate scrutiny fueled my resolve. Internally, I analyzed the political landscape more carefully, noting allies who might be sympathetic and adversaries who would double down on obstruction. I understood that procedural fidelity was not just a strategy, it was a shield against the chaos Ronan sought to unleash. I was navigating a compromised system, but I refused to become a casualty of its failures. Instead, I was becoming an architect of its accountability. The retaliation that followed was swift and merciless. Ronan froze my long-anticipated promotion indefinitely, intercepting the formal approval process and halting the $15,000 salary bump that would have reflected my contributions. I was informed via an impersonal HR notice that budgetary constraints required reassessment of all pending promotions, a transparent pretext given the timing. At the same time, a $250,000 client engagement expansion, an initiative I had personally championed and which had cleared multiple internal reviews, was abruptly cancelled. The official explanation cited strategic realignment, but the underlying motive was clear: to choke off the growth under my stewardship. These professional blows rippled into my personal life. I postponed a long-planned family vacation and shelved home improvement projects, carefully balancing finances as the uncertainty of my income weighed heavily. Beyond the numbers, the psychological toll was apparent. I moved through my days with a heightened sense of vigilance and restraint. More insidiously, Ronan began directly contacting several of my key clients under the guise of departmental restructuring, pitching alternative contract terms designed to circumvent my involvement. This covert client poaching threatened my portfolio, putting $1.6 million in active contracts at risk. Witnesses among colleagues noted the campaign, some expressing quiet sympathy, but the climate of fear kept them silent. I was isolated, professionally diminished, but strategically calculating my next move. Amid this assault, I recognized the limits of endurance within Crestline's toxic ecosystem. My loyalty and performance no longer shielded me. Instead, they made me a target. Yet I maintained my adherence to company policies and protocols, understanding that any misstep would be capitalized upon. Behind closed doors, I expanded my horizon, exploring external opportunities and discreetly strengthening connections beyond Crestline's confines. The game had evolved from survival to strategic repositioning. While outwardly composed, I was mapping a path to reclaim my agency and protect the assets I had cultivated over more than a decade. The stakes had never been higher, and the risk correspondingly profound. Determined to exhaust all formal avenues, I drafted a comprehensive letter addressed directly to Crestline's CEO. The letter meticulously summarized every documented infraction by Ronan, supported by authoritative legal opinions from Marcus Hayes that outlined contractual violations and client interference breaches. I proposed a formal investigation, highlighting the tangible risks to Crestline's revenue streams and employee morale. I offered to mediate solutions that would restore professional equity and safeguard the company's interests. The letter was crafted with cold logic and strategic foresight, avoiding emotional appeals, focusing instead on concrete evidence and corporate fiduciary responsibility. The response was a study in corporate indifference. The CEO declined to intervene, citing confidence in departmental leadership and emphasizing the importance of business continuity. The language was carefully measured, but unmistakably dismissive. Alongside the rejection, I observed a subtle but perceptible organizational backlash. My office resources were quietly reduced, IT support was slower, budget allocations tightened, and my calendar increasingly controlled by Ronan's administrative staff. Meetings I once led were reassigned or cancelled with little explanation. The message was clear: I was officially sidelined, and the company apparatus was aligned against me. Faced with this systemic dismissal, I acknowledged that traditional channels within Crestline were exhausted. The rules of engagement had changed, and my options had narrowed. Yet I remained resolute, committed to leveraging every asset I controlled: the client engagement tracker, my encrypted archives, loyal clients, and legal counsel. I began formulating a strategic pivot, one that would utilize these resources to assert my position beyond Crestlin's compromised internal politics. The cold calculus was unavoidable. Survival and success demanded adaptability, patience, and an unwavering commitment to outmaneuver those who sought to erase my professional legacy. The fight was far from over. It had merely entered a new critical phase. The demotion hit like a calculated strike, surgical in its precision and devastating in effect. Ronan reassigned me to a junior account role, a veneer of duty that stripped me of every strategic function I once commanded. My purview shrank to maintenance-level client interactions, routine contract renewals that required no vision, no negotiation prowess. It was a professional exile. The sharp click of the elevator doors each morning echoed my isolation as I entered an office where colleagues, once cordial, now skirted around me like shadows avoiding a contagion. Their glances were quick, hesitant, silent judgments rooted in whispered insinuations of underperformance. The atmosphere was a minefield, and I navigated it with a calm exterior, trading the warmth of alliance for a cold, impersonal shell. Financial repercussions followed swiftly. Bonuses that were once a given, reflective of my contributions and client retention, suddenly evaporated. The company's murmurs about organizational changes cloaked the reality of targeted retaliation. I felt the sting of each withheld dollar, not because of personal greed, but because every cent represented acknowledgement of merit, now denied. My reputation, painstakingly constructed over 12 years, was under siege. Rumors painted me as a liability, a fading star eclipsed by newer, less capable colleagues, favored by Ronan's political games. Yet externally, I maintained composure, masking the building frustration beneath layers of professionalism. Every meeting, every email, every client call was a calculated exercise in restraint, an effort to preserve the last threads of credibility while recalibrating my approach. Isolation wasn't just social, it was operational. I watched as projects I had initiated were quietly reassigned, my input disregarded in strategy sessions. I was barred from attending. The subtle exclusion was a tactic, a weapon refined to silence influence without overt confrontation. Even Alison Porter, a trusted colleague who once collaborated seamlessly with me, distanced herself. Her emails became curt, her responses procedural. I sensed the pressure on her, the unspoken warning that proximity to me was dangerous. I accepted these fractures as collateral damage in a battle I intended to win. Each slight, each dismissal was meticulously logged, a dossier of injustices carefully archived for the day I'd turn the tables. Inside, the conflict churned quietly, but with relentless intensity. The facade of calm I wore was a mask, concealing the strategic calculations that occupied my mind. Emotional turmoil was present, but subdued, acknowledged only in rare moments behind closed doors. I understood that any visible crack in my demeanor would be exploited to justify further marginalization. Instead, I converted frustration to focus, anger to analytical clarity. The phenomenon was familiar. When stripped of overt power, the mind sharpens, seeking leverage in overlooked vulnerabilities. Ronan underestimated the resilience born from professional devastation. My network, though diminished, was not extinguished. My control of the CET system, my exclusive client relationships, and my documented evidence remained intact. This was not surrender. It was a tactical retreat. The weekend after the demotion, I sat alone in my apartment, reviewing the latest correspondence and internal memos that reflected my new diminished status. The hum of the city outside was a distant reminder of a world that continued evolving without me. I allowed myself a rare moment of silent acknowledgement. This was the lowest point, the nadir from which I would have to climb. The professional isolation was suffocating, but beneath it lay a seed of cold calculation that would soon germinate into a plan. No reaction, no confrontation, no public display, just gathering strength. I reminded myself that control was an illusion easily shattered, but also a currency I still wielded with precision. The game was far from over, and I was sharpening my pieces for the next move. Then came the final blow, delivered with the cold timing of a calculated execution. At 5 p.m. on a Friday, a crisp envelope slid under my office door, a formal termination notice. The language was sterile, almost bureaucratic. Organizational restructuring and performance realignment masked the true nature of the dismissal. The timing was no accident. It coincided precisely with my refusal to sign a restrictive non-compete addendum that would have surrendered my intellectual property rights. The message was clear: compliance or exile. But the letter was merely the tip of the iceberg. Simultaneously, I uncovered that Ronan had covertly established a parallel sales unit designed explicitly to target my key clients. This rogue faction operated using confidential contract details I had painstakingly logged in CET, weaponizing my own work against me. That revelation, hit with the force of betrayal, magnified 1,000-fold. I reviewed the evidence: internal memos leaked by a disgruntled junior associate, email chains between Ronan and his favored operatives, and copies of client proposals suspiciously similar to mine, but under different signatures. The risk was staggering: $1. 6 million in active contracts, nearly 90% of our department's revenue, was now vulnerable to being siphoned away. Beyond the immediate financial threat, a deeper rot surfaced. Ronan's political maneuvering extended outside our walls. Sales figures presented to investors were manipulated, inflating performance metrics to mask the internal sabotage. My entire career, a project of 12 years' meticulous cultivation, was being dismantled with ruthless efficiency. I sat back, the sterile office lighting stark against the storm of realization inside. The betrayal was irrevocable, a line crossed from internal power play to outright corporate warfare. But instead of despair, a new clarity emerged. The emotional fog cleared, replaced by a clinical resolve. Now I understand the full extent of the game Ronan's playing, and I know exactly how to win it, I thought. This wasn't about recovering lost status within a compromised system. It was about leveraging every piece of documented evidence, every client relationship, and every strategic asset I controlled to pivot decisively. The loyal clients, the proprietary systems, the digital archives, they were not just remnants of my past, but ammunition for my future. The shift from loyal employee to strategic adversary was complete in that moment, cold and unyielding. The days that followed were consumed by a ruthless inventory of professional assets, a forensic analysis of everything I had at my disposal. The client contracts alone represented $1.8 million in annual revenue, assets I had personally negotiated and nurtured. I catalogued every email, every contract amendment, every strategic proposal archived within my encrypted CET system. These documents formed a digital skeleton key to unlock the truth. I cross-referenced dates, signatures, and timestamps, isolating evidence of Ronan's breaches, unauthorized client solicitation, theft of intellectual property, and clear breaches of fiduciary duty. It was a dossier of corporate malfeasance waiting to be deployed. Legal counsel was a critical component of this assessment. I consulted Marcus Hayes, whose expertise in corporate law provided confirmation. The non-compete clause Ronan pushed was ambiguous and, given the company's actions restricting my client communications, unenforceable. This gave me a strategic foothold. I also identified disaffected colleagues who had quietly suffered under Ronan's political machinations. Their willingness to support, even if covertly, was a vital piece of the puzzle. Equally important were the clients, many of whom expressed unease with the company's instability and Ronan's aggressive tactics. Their loyalty to me was an asset I could activate. Together, these elements composed a multi-pronged strategy that combined legal action, client engagement, and career repositioning beyond Crestline's compromised environment. Meticulous preparation became the modus operandi. I secured all digital evidence, 12 years of correspondence, contracts, and internal communications, exported to encrypted drives stored off-site. Physical copies were similarly archived in a secure, undisclosed location. 5 former colleagues, including Alison Porter, agreed to provide sworn testimonies corroborating Ronan's credit theft and sabotage. I formalized the CET system's copyrights and trademarks, establishing clear legal ownership that predated any contractual obligation to Crestline. This was a defensive move to protect intellectual property, a line Ronan had already crossed. Simultaneously, I initiated contact with regulatory bodies overseeing sales ethics and client solicitation, preparing for complaints should the situation escalate. Parallel to the legal and regulatory groundwork, I engaged in discreet negotiations with Bridgepoint Solutions, a competitor known for strategic acquisitions in our sector. Preliminary discussions with Peter Collins signaled openness to a potential employment offer and investment interest to support a rival account management division. This provided an external contingency, a safety net ensuring I wouldn't be cornered professionally. I established financial reserves and secured legal representation prepared to act at short notice. These preparations were conducted with utmost discretion. Public exposure would be premature and counterproductive. Throughout this phase, I maintained professional decorum, careful to avoid any hint of retaliation that could jeopardize my position or leverage. The transformation from victim to architect of strategy was underway, silent, calculated, inevitable. In the weeks leading up to my departure, I orchestrated a series of client visits under the guise of routine check-ins, each meticulously planned to avoid raising suspicion. The cadence was familiar enough to pass as standard procedure, but every conversation was a calculated probe to recalibrate loyalty and reaffirm trust. I steered dialogue carefully, hinting at dissatisfaction with Crestline's leadership without revealing the depth or intent of my discontent. "We're navigating some internal shifts," I'd say with measured tone, gauging every reaction for signs of unease or defection. These meetings were as much intelligence gathering as client retention, each phrase chosen, each silence noted. Simultaneously, I compiled a detailed inventory of dependencies, client contracts, personal relationships, proprietary data access, and soft power within the department. I cross-checked these against internal systems and identified the precise leverage points. For instance, the CET platform, a proprietary account management tool I had helped develop, remained under my control. This was a digital fortress, holding not just client data, but patterns of negotiation and strategic insights. I knew that controlling CET meant controlling a significant portion of Crestline's operational knowledge. At night, I'd sit with spreadsheets and contract files spread across my desk, methodically cataloging every asset and vulnerability. Legal counsel became an indispensable part of this phase. I had Marcus Hayes review every contractual clause, focusing on retention rights, non-competes, and potential breaches by management. Marcus's cold clinical language confirmed my suspicions. The company's tightening grip was legally overreaching, and I had actionable grounds to challenge it. His counsel wasn't just advisory, it was a blueprint for my next moves. I also engaged with a network of professionals, regulatory contacts, industry insiders, discreetly probing the risks and benefits of potential escalations. Documentation was paramount. Every email thread, every memo, every recorded conversation was archived with timestamps, creating an airtight evidentiary chain. Throughout, I maintained a facade of controlled confidence. Ronan remained unaware of the breadth of my preparations, distracted by internal politicking and his own insecurities. I observed him flounder, focused on consolidating superficial power, rather than addressing substantive operational vulnerabilities. It was almost laughable how narrowly he viewed the battlefield. Meanwhile, I positioned every piece for a seamless, swift pivot. I rehearsed the timing in my mind. When the right moment came, I would move decisively, and Crestline would be caught off guard. The final act of this phase was a legal notice of intent to resign, drafted with meticulous precision, to signal potential breach litigation if mistreatment persisted. It was my card on the table, unplayed but unmistakable. The atmosphere around me was deceptively calm. Outwardly, I maintained all professional appearances, attending meetings, responding to emails, smiling when necessary. But beneath that veneer flowed a current of cold calculation. Each action was a deliberate step, each interaction a data point in a wider map of vulnerabilities and alliances. I had made contact with Bridgepoint Solutions Intensify, finalizing terms that included retention of my entire client portfolio, 47 high-value clients, commanding $1.8 million in annual revenue. Ronan, busy with his petty power plays, remained blind to the seismic shift I was engineering beneath his nose. My confidence swelled, not from hubris, but from the certainty of preparation. Every piece was now in place, every risk measured, every contingency accounted for. I was ready to pivot when the moment arrived, and that moment was coming soon. In the days that followed, My preparation deepened into a silent, unyielding discipline. Passwords across all work-related systems were changed. Complex, untraceable combinations stored securely. Two-factor authentication was activated on every possible account, ensuring that Crestline could not access proprietary information without authorization. I coordinated with Marcus Hayes to update legal documentation, reinforcing contractual protections and preparing for any retaliatory legal maneuvers. At home, the atmosphere was quiet but purposeful. Emily, my wife, understood the stakes without need for elaborate explanation. "This is the right move," she said with pragmatic calm, her voice steady. Her support was a pillar, and I briefed her in detail on timelines and protocols, ensuring she was prepared for any fallout. Maintaining a normal office facade was critical. I adhered to routine schedules, responded to emails promptly, and even attended a few low-stakes meetings to dispel any suspicions. This was the calm before the storm, a period of professional patience and measured restraint, designed to prevent premature exposure. Every interaction was stripped of emotional weight, conducted with the cold precision of a chess master moving pieces into position. Internally, I set a strict deadline. Resignation submitted on the first business day after my planned vacation, synchronized with Bridgepoint's formal announcement of my hire. Preparations for press releases and client notifications were finalized, scripts crafted to emphasize continuity and professionalism. The timing was tactical. The element of surprise would be absolute. As this phase progressed, I keenly observed the office dynamics. Ronan remained oblivious, his focus absorbed by minor internal conflicts and superficial metrics. His tunnel vision was a strategic advantage. I used the silence and the false sense of security he exuded to conceal the burgeoning storm. The quiet corridors, the routine emails, the mundane meetings, all of it was a mask covering the intricate web of calculated moves I had laid. My posture was calm, my demeanor unreadable. The tension was internal, a cold anticipation of the moment I would sever ties and unleash the carefully prepared sequence of actions. The professional reinvention I was about to initiate would be total, irreversible, and devastatingly effective. Late one evening, just hours before my scheduled resignation, my phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Peter Collins, director at Bridgepoint Solutions. The call that followed was brief but loaded with explosive information. Peter revealed that Bridgepoint's offer wasn't merely for me as an individual, but explicitly included contractual agreements to onboard my entire client portfolio, 47 active high-value clients, managing $1.8 million in annual revenue annually. This was no ordinary recruitment. It was a strategic market disruption designed to undercut Crestline's dominance by leveraging my unique client relationships. The gravity of the move was palpable. Peter laid out the financial terms: a base salary 30% higher than what I earned at Crestline, supplemented by a $250,000 signing bonus tied directly to client retention milestones. This was a reward structure engineered to secure loyalty and maximize mutual gain. What struck me most was Peter's assurance of Bridgepoint's readiness to absorb any legal challenges Crestline might mount. They had assembled a top-tier legal team specializing in employment disputes and intellectual property rights, pre-positioned to neutralize any threats. This wasn't merely a career pivot. It was a strategic industry maneuver with significant financial and competitive implications. The stakes had suddenly expanded far beyond personal vindication. I was now the linchpin in a rival company's aggressive expansion strategy. The calculated leverage I had painstakingly built was validated on a scale I hadn't fully anticipated. The call ended with Peter emphasizing the urgency of my resignation and imminent onboarding, underscoring the window of opportunity closing fast. I sat back, absorbing the implications with cold clarity. The twist elevated my position from a disgruntled employee executing a personal exit to the central figure in a corporate chess game with broad market reverberations. This revelation refined my strategic calculus. Timing was everything, and speed was now critical. The legal and PR frameworks I had prepared were no longer just defensive tools, but offensive weapons in a larger battle. The validation from Bridgepoint crystallized my resolve. The next moves would determine not just my future, but the fate of the client relationships I had nurtured for over a decade. The game's parameters had changed, and I was ready to recalibrate accordingly. The morning after my vacation, I arrived at Crestline's headquarters with precise intent. At 9:15 a.m., I submitted my formal resignation to HR, accompanied by a letter that was both comprehensive and unyielding. It outlined documented breaches of contract and unethical management practices, specifically implicating Ronan Wright. The tone was clinical, the language exact, a dossier laid out in cold detail rather than emotional grievance. This letter was not a plea, but a declaration of intent. Simultaneously, I filed a formal complaint with the Industry Regulatory Board concerning client solicitation violations, ensuring the groundwork for any future legal proceedings. My moves were surgical, systemic, designed to maximize immediate impact and constrain reaction time. At the same moment, I activated a kill switch embedded within the CET system. This function archived all client data securely, disabling Crestline's access to proprietary contract analytics critical to their operations. It was a digital lockout that preserved my informational advantage and protected client confidentiality. By 11 a.m., I had informed my entire client base of my departure and new affiliation with Bridgepoint Solutions. The communication was crafted to emphasize service continuity and enhanced value, minimizing uncertainty and reinforcing loyalty. Clients responded with a mix of surprise and gratitude. Their allegiance to me was evident. Meanwhile, Crestline's leadership, including Ronan, received a coordinated notification outlining my legal intentions and client retention strategy. Ronan's initial response was predictable damage control, emails sent en masse, calls to key clients attempting reassurance, thinly veiled threats disguised as corporate statements. But my posture remained unshakable, professional, resolute, and legally fortified. Every action was a calculated chess move designed to assert dominance and preempt countermeasures. The office buzzed with tension, but I maintained a calm exterior, a cold observer executing a pre-planned strategy. The first phase of execution was complete, and the ripple effects were immediate. The battlefield had shifted under Ronan's feet, and he was caught off guard. I was no longer a sidelined subordinate, but a formidable adversary operating with precision and control. The day of the board meeting arrived with a sterile tension that hung in the air like a static charge. The glass conference room was cold, its sleek surfaces reflecting the hard stares of Crestline's executives. I stepped in with a calm resolve honed by weeks of preparation, my laptop carrying the digital arsenal I had compiled, time-stamped emails, contract archives, CET system logs, and recorded testimonies from former colleagues who had witnessed Ronan's maneuvers firsthand. The room was thick with guarded skepticism, but I was ready to dismantle every defense Ronan had built. I opened with Marcus Hayes's legal analysis, clinical, precise, and unyielding. "What you're about to see," I said, voice steady, "is a pattern of deliberate interference, credit theft, and client manipulation orchestrated by Mr. Wright himself." I projected emails showing Ronan siphoning credit for deals I had closed, documented attempts to poach my clients through back channels, and contract alterations that bypassed proper protocol. The board's skepticism cracked as a few key witnesses, summoned discreetly ahead of time, corroborated my evidence. One former team member recounted a meeting where Ronan reassigned clients without explanation. Another shared emails proving unauthorized contract modifications. Ronan's face tightened, his usual smirk dissolved into a mask of disbelief and thinly veiled panic. He interjected, fumbling for explanations. Departmental restructuring, market volatility, these decisions were necessary for aligning with corporate strategy. But I was ready for this. I countered with a documented timeline showing that these restructuring moves coincided suspiciously with his attempts to marginalize my portfolio. I highlighted how his actions exposed Crestline to potential regulatory risks, a fact the board could not ignore given the scale of revenue at stake. The atmosphere shifted palpably. The power dynamic inverted as I laid out the financial stakes. $8 million annually in contracts directly tied to my relationships, now jeopardized by Ronan's reckless behavior. The board leaned in, their questions probing, but clearly leaning toward accountability. By the meeting's close, Crestline's executives mandated an independent audit and launched formal investigations into Ronan's conduct. Ronan sat silently, his influence eroding with each passing moment. I left the room with a quiet satisfaction, not from triumph but from the cold assurance that justice, backed by unassailable facts, had tilted decisively in my favor. The aftermath of the confrontation rippled swiftly through Crestline. Within days, regulatory bodies initiated inquiries into client solicitation ethics and intellectual property breaches tied to Ronan's tenure. The projected fines exceeding $750,000 sent shockwaves through the company's financial forecasts. Investor confidence tumbled, reflected starkly in a 12% drop in share price over 2 weeks. Ronan's professional reputation disintegrated under the harsh light of public scrutiny. His forced resignation was a mere formality. The internal fallout had already isolated him. As his empire crumbled, a steady flow of disgruntled employees and clients came forward, confirming what I had suspected all along, a systemic pattern of mismanagement and manipulation. Industry media seized the story, framing it as a cautionary tale of toxic corporate politics, undermining business integrity. Headlines dissected Ronan's downfall and heralded the effectiveness of fact-based accountability. I maintained a deliberate detachment. My focus was forward, not backward. Bridgepoint Solutions, swift and strategic, capitalized on the disruption by fully integrating my portfolio, reinforcing client confidence with targeted communications and continuity assurances. The systemic justice I had sought, disrupting corrupt leadership and restoring rightful professional recognition, was unfolding methodically. This was no personal vendetta, but a strategic realignment powered by documented evidence and regulatory enforcement, a recalibration of power within the corporate hierarchy. Despite the chaos around me, I kept a steady course. My attention remained on operational stability and expanding the client base at Bridgepoint. The fallout at Crestline was a testament to the potency of meticulous preparation and disciplined execution. The collapse of Ronan's influence was not a moment of schadenfreude, but a confirmation that competence and integrity, when coupled with strategic acumen, could dismantle even the most entrenched political apparatus. I understood that the path ahead required continued vigilance, but the immediate crisis had been neutralized. The playing field had been reset, and I was firmly in control of my professional destiny. Ronan's attempts to reassert control became increasingly desperate and transparent. Weeks after his resignation, I received an unsolicited email proposing a confidential settlement, an offer cloaked in financial inducement to drop all legal claims. The terms were lucrative, but the message was clear, a final attempt to silence me and close the matter quietly. I consulted with Marcus Hayes and declined decisively. The offer was an admission of guilt thinly veiled by self-interest. My response was firm and unambiguous: no negotiation without accountability. Subsequently, Ronan orchestrated a series of covert attacks. Anonymous leaks aimed at damaging my reputation circulated in industry forums and internal company channels. Yet clients and colleagues swiftly rallied, publicly reaffirming their loyalty to me and to Bridgepoint. Their statements underscored a collective repudiation of Ronan's tactics. Internally, a token apology circulated among Ronan's remaining allies, but it rang hollow, lacking sincerity or acknowledgement of wrongdoing. These last-ditch efforts to destabilize me through regulatory complaints and smear campaigns faltered under close scrutiny. Investigations found no merit in these baseless claims, reinforcing my position. Throughout these trials, I remained strategically reserved, unshaken by provocations, refusing to engage in petty retaliations or personal vendettas. My focus was on reconstruction and growth, leveraging the trust I had painstakingly earned from clients and colleagues. The system's favor rested with documented facts, professional conduct, and established loyalty networks. Ronan's isolation grew. His former influence diminished to whispers and closed doors. The final chapters of this confrontation were written not in firestorms, but with cold, unyielding precision, proof that sustained competence and adherence to principle could prevail over manipulation and deceit. Transitioning to Bridgepoint Solutions marked a definitive new beginning. My base salary increased by 30%, landing at $234,000 annually, augmented by a $250,000 signing bonus and performance incentives directly tied to client retention and portfolio growth. These terms reflected not just my value, but the strategic importance of the client relationships I maintained. Within 6 months, my portfolio expanded by 20%, surpassing $2 to $16 million in annual contracts, a tangible validation of client trust and my professional stewardship. The legal resolution culminated in a $1.2 million settlement from Crestline for breach of contract and intellectual property violations, alongside an industry-wide regulatory clearance confirming my integrity. The professional narrative had shifted dramatically. I was now recognized not just as a proficient account manager, but as a principled strategist who navigated corporate politics with impeccable foresight and systematic rigor. At home, the increased financial security and reduced stress restored equilibrium. Plans previously deferred, family vacations, home improvements, long-term savings, resumed with renewed confidence. Reflecting on the ordeal, I distilled the experience into one fundamental lesson: document everything, maintain professionalism, trust the systemized processes of justice. This was not a moral sermon, but a statement of tactical reality. Meanwhile, Ronan Wright's career languished in obscurity. His Machiavellian tactics, once cloaked in corporate power, were exposed and irreparably punished. His name became a cautionary emblem in industry circles, a case study in the perils of underestimating strategic competence, masked by political posturing. My story, by contrast, emerged as a blueprint for overcoming betrayal through calculated, fact-based action and unwavering client loyalty. The final balance sheet was clear. Measured strategy and meticulous documentation can decisively rewrite professional narratives, replacing manipulation with merit and chaos with order.